So I want you to just take a second and imagine your inner monologue. That constant background hum of planning and worrying and craving and analyzing yourself.
Yeah, the voice that basically never shuts up for most of us.
Exactly. But what if that internal narrator didn't just completely disappear, but what if it just stopped running in the background all the time?
Like a completely quiet mind. Which, clinically speaking, if someone walked in saying they had zero anxiety about tomorrow and no desire to chase rewards.
You'd think it was a crisis, right? Like they were completely shutting down.
Oh, absolutely. In a standard psychiatric setting, that's a massive red flag. We're so conditioned to believe that, stress and craving are the engines of survival.
Right, but what if it's actually just a completely different, maybe even highly efficient way for a human brain to exist? Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to just exist without your brain constantly generating a threat narrative or a massive to-do list?
It's a fascinating question.
Well, today we actually have a roadmap of exactly what that looks like. Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're exploring a really incredible source document. It's titled Integrated Summary of My Current Baseline, PNSC, Framed but Medically Cautious.
And we should probably decode that acronym right away. So
Yeah.
PNSE stands for Persistent Non-Symbolic Experience.
Which sounds very technical.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
It's basically a clinical framework. It describes a state where your brain just stops relying on abstract concepts or symbols, like the concept of your identity or your ego,
Right.
to interpret reality. You just experience reality directly.
Yeah, and the mission for this deep dive is really to explore this incredibly detailed clinical self-report because this person is experiencing a profound, stable shift into what they call a low-noise, low-threat, low-craving mode.
And they do it with such intense medical caution. There's no, mystical enlightenment claims here.
Right, no crystals or transcending biology.
Exactly. They're just translating their daily subjective experience into hard neuroscience.
Okay, let's unpack this because the foundation of everything the author experiences starts with the quieting of that inner narrator. And we all know that voice.
The one that randomly reminds you of something embarrassing you did 5 years ago?
Yes, that exact voice. So the author points to a shift in the default mode network, or the DMN. And pop science loves to treat the DMN like it's just this simple ego switch. Like you just flip it off and boom, you're enlightened.
Right, which is completely inaccurate.
Yeah.
Modern neuroscience views the default mode network as this massive distributed system. It handles self-reference, autobiographical memory, internal modeling.
It's basically the system that stitches together the story of you across time, right?
Precisely. And it burns a ton of metabolic energy to keep that narrative going.
But our source notes something wild. They say their DMN, or at least their experience of it, is not resident, but rises on demand. So the analogy I like to use is it's like your brain has a director's commentary track playing over a movie.
Oh, I like that.
Right. And for most of us, that commentary is just stuck on. We literally can't watch the movie of our lives without the director talking over every single scene.
Analyzing everything.
Yeah. But for the author, the commentary is muted by default. They can still turn it on if they need to, like explain a concept or talk to someone at a party, but it's not running constantly.
Medically, they frame this as a reduced foregrounding of narrative self-processing. So usually the brain forces the self into the foreground of every single experience.
Like, how does this affect me?
Exactly. But here, the emphasis shifts from that narrative emphasis to a purely experiential one. They're just observing. The looping inner talk only comes online when it actually has a functional purpose.
Which brings up a huge question. If that inner director is suddenly offline, because let's be honest, that narrator is usually our main threat prediction engine. It's the thing screaming about a deadline 3 weeks away.
Right, it's constantly simulating danger.
So if it stops doing that, does the body's alarm system just shut down? Because the author says they have a relative absence of adrenaline-like activation. No tight chest, no agitation, none of that sympathetic vigilance.
And to understand that, we really have to look at interoception research.
Interoception being how we feel our insides, basically.
Yeah, it's your brain's perception of sensations inside your body. Heartbeat, breathing, digestion. Historically, we used to think anxiety was just the raw bodily activation. Like, your heart beats fast, therefore you are anxious.
But that's not the whole picture.
Not at all. Anxiety isn't the raw data. It's how your brain predicts and interprets and integrates those signals. The brain guesses what a stomach flutter means based on the story your narrative mind is telling.
Okay, that makes so much sense. Because my heart beats super fast if I'm on a treadmill, but it also beats that fast if I'm having a panic attack about public speaking. The raw physical data is the same.
Exactly. The raw data is nearly identical.
But the story my brain tells about the data totally changes how it feels.
Wait, so if they don't feel physical vigilance, are they just numb to the world? Like, are their physical sensations just at zero?
What's fascinating here is that the physiological arousal isn't literally zero. The raw data from the body is still there.
Okay.
But because the narrative self is quiet, those signals aren't being amplified into a massive threat narrative. The body feels a stomach flutter or a heart rate increase, but the mind doesn't panic. The sensation happens and then it just passes.
So if a car suddenly swerves into their lane, they aren't just going to sit there obliviously.
No, their reflexes are completely intact. The sympathetic nervous system spikes, they hit the brakes.
They don't get the psychological dread afterward.
Right, they don't spend the next 3 hours ruminating, thinking, oh my God, I almost died, driving is never safe. The suffering doesn't attach to the reflex. Wow, that is just, it's wild to consider. So the body feels, but the mind doesn't manufacture panic. So we have this absence of threat. They aren't running away from things. But what about drive? Are they running toward anything?
That's the logical next question.
Yeah, because the author reports an absence of strong, adult-style reward drive. Like that, I need to pursue this energy.
Well, the neuroscience of reward really clarifies this. For a long time, we conflated the desire for a reward with the actual enjoyment of it. But neurologically, they are totally distinct. We have to separate dopamine-related wanting from hedonic liking.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because when people hear low dopamine, they picture like total apathy, staring at a blank wall.
Right, clinical depression.
Yeah, but it's more like, okay, think about the difference between staring at a restaurant menu and obsessing over how good the food will be. That's the dopamine anticipation.
The craving.
Exactly. Versus just sitting in a park and enjoying the sun on your face. So they've lost the craving, the wanting, but they kept the present moment joy, the liking.
That's a great analogy. Dopamine systems drive what we call incentive salience. It's the motivational push. It makes a goal feel urgent. But the actual enjoyment, the consummatory enjoyment, happens in completely different networks.
The hedonic hotspots, right.
Yes, tiny little regions in the brain that just process pure pleasure.
So the dopamine system is the marketing department, and the hedonic hotspots are the actual product. And this author basically fired their marketing department.
That's one way to put it. And that's why they emphasize this is not global anhedonia. In severe depression, everything flattens out. But here, the consummatory enjoyment is perfectly preserved.
They mention it's like a childlike enjoyment, right?
Yeah, direct and simple, like a kid building a sandcastle. The kid isn't strategizing about how the sandcastle is going to advance their career.
Or build their personal brand.
Exactly. They're just directly experiencing the joy of the sand.
They're just in the sand. So, okay, let's look at where we are. We've got a brain with no inner monologue, no anxiety loops, and no dopamine craving for future rewards.
That's pretty relaxing.
It sounds amazing. But let me play devil's advocate here. How does this person actually function? Like, how do you pay your taxes or meet a boring deadline without that internal pressure? If you have no craving and no threat alarm, wouldn't you just lie on the couch forever doing nothing?
You'd think so, right? But the text describes this as a low-noise cruising mode. Their concentration doesn't drop. And boredom is mostly absent.
Wait, really? No boredom?
Yeah. Action just continues without that dopamine push. Because if we look at it neurologically, sustained attention doesn't actually require high arousal.
Really? I feel like I need to be stressed to focus.
We're used to that, but too much self-referential activity actually causes cognitive friction. When you're trying to read a spreadsheet, but your DMN is screaming about what your boss thinks of you.
That takes a ton of energy to tune out.
Exactly. It actively interferes with the task. So modern network models don't just see the DMN as a bad distraction network, it's about dynamic coordination. When you remove that narrative pressure, it allows for this quiet, continuous attention.
So the inner narrator isn't keeping us on task. It's actually the main thing distracting us.
Precisely. They do the work because it's just the next logical thing to do, not because their identity depends on it.
And the document gets into the actual physical reality of this. It's not just a mindset. The author talks about biomechanics. They mention lying supine without a pillow, light lateral abdominal anchoring, dorsal expansion.
Right, the physical posture.
Yeah, and passive attention to the breath gap. It's highly specific.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it highlights embodied cognition. Our brains aren't floating in jars. They are tightly coupled with our physical states.
So when they talk about dorsal expansion expanding the back of the ribs, they're physically manipulating the nervous system.
Yes, they are sending a continuous mechanical signal through the vagus nerve up to the brain. It's a bottom-up signal saying, the physical structure of this organism is secure. No need to mobilize for a threat.
Oh, wow. So instead of being hunched over a desk with shallow breathing, which tells the brain we're under attack, they are actively anchoring the body to provide feedback that everything is safe.
Exactly. If the vagus nerve reports total safety, the brain doesn't need to boot up the threat simulation software.
That's incredible. But okay, given how radically different this is from the average highly stressed human, we do have to talk about the clinical boundaries.
Yes. The medical caution.
Right, because if I walked into a doctor's office and said, I have no desire, no anxiety, and my ego is gone, they'd probably try to medicate me. So is this a medical deficit?
This raises an important question, and the author explicitly addresses it. This isn't a temporary peak state for meditating, it's their baseline. But the clinical caution is that this state is only valid as long as basic life functions remain intact.
Like sleeping and eating.
Yes. Cognition, sleep, appetite, basic societal functioning. If the simple pleasure fades into true anhedonia, or if fatigue spikes, then it crosses into pathology.
Like an endocrine issue or depression.
Exactly. But as long as those functions are preserved or even enhanced by the lack of internal friction, it's not a deficit.
So if a doctor looked at this, would they try to cure it?
Under a conservative medical formulation, no. A clinician treats distress and dysfunction. If there's no distress and they are functioning beautifully, there's nothing to cure. It's just a stable, cognitive effective reconfiguration.
A completely different but healthy equilibrium.
Yes. Lower narrative load, lower motivational load, fully preserved function.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? The author is living in a low-noise, low-threat, low-craving mode. The narrator is quiet, anxiety and desire loops are muted, but functional clarity and simple joy are totally intact.
It's a profound shift.
It really is. I want you to notice tomorrow how much of your daily energy is hijacked by anticipatory wanting, obsessing over a reward that isn't here yet, or how much energy is drained by threat narratives, worrying about something that might not even happen.
We spend so much energy trying to satisfy that narrator.
We really do. Notice how often that director's commentary track is talking over the actual movie of your life. And it leaves us with this pretty wild final thought. If we now know that human beings can function clearly and experience joy without the constant engine of anxiety and craving pushing us forward,
Which totally upends our societal assumptions.
what does that say about the modern world we've built? If our society runs on stimulating wanting and triggering threat loops, what would happen to our daily lives if we all just learned how to switch to low-noise cruising mode?
It would completely change the foundation of how we motivate ourselves.
Something to mull over the next time your inner narrator starts giving you a hard time. Until next time, take care.